All right, so 8.6 stock transactions. Now in the book, they describe portfolio. Stock portfolio is the set of all stocks a person or a group owns, right? More than that, if you have a portfolio, you have other investments too. There's other things to invest in other than stocks, right? So really a portfolio, stop doing that. Jeez. It's all of a person's investments, stocks, bonds, gold, silver, right? All of a person's investments. So it could be stocks, definitely. Bonds, we'll get into what bonds are a little later. You might buy gold or silver as an investment. Or any other precious metal, you know, platinum, everything. CDs, which is a certificate of deposit. Anybody ever heard of a CD at the bank? Okay. It's kind of like a savings account, but you don't really have access to it until it matures, right? But that way, you get a higher interest rate if you agree to that, right? More return on it. CDs, ever heard of an IRA? IRA is an individual retirement account, right? And other things, right? So portfolio is pretty much the collection of everything you've invested in, right? And that portfolio as a whole will have a return based on like a weighted average of all the returns, all the investments in it. We'll get into that part a little bit later. Now, if you're going to make a portfolio, an investment portfolio, it's really important to diversify, okay? What does that mean? Diversified portfolio. What do you think might happen if you have a portfolio, right? Maybe you have it set up so that you can retire someday. Oh, we'll do the quiz here, right? Since you can retire someday, but you invested in one company stock, and that's all that's in your portfolio. What might be the risk there? Yeah, right? Okay. So if you diversify your portfolio, that means buying several different stocks across several different industries and sectors in the economy, okay? That way, if one industry or sector tanks, you have other things in there that probably are going to go up, right? And so it kind of balances it out. So it washes some of the risk away. Right, so a diversified portfolio is investments spread out among many different things, right? And so it hedges the risk a little bit of any one company stock going in the tank, right? So the saying is never put your eggs in one basket, right? Why would that be? Never put all your eggs in one basket. It's an old saying. What do you think that means? Not necessarily. What if you drop the basket? That's all your eggs, right? Never put all your eggs in one basket. Okay? So if you're going to have a decently diversified portfolio to help manage some of the risk of losing money, you want to be, invested across like 20 to 30 different companies or industries or sectors. Like even if it's, let's say one industry, like let's say you invest in a bunch of different companies, but they're all tech companies, right? So it's a bunch of different companies, but the tech sector of the economy could very well go down sharply at some point, and you have no other investment to offset that. Does that make sense? So you want to be across different industries as well as different companies, right? Now, in the book, they talk about capital gains and capital losses, right? So if you purchase a stock, right, and the value of that stock goes up, and then you sell it, you made a profit, right? You made some money. That's called a capital gain, and you get cash for that, right? So now that gets taxed as your income, okay? So you have to pay taxes on that. Well, what do you think would happen if you bought a stock for $10 and the price went up to $30 a few years later, but you didn't sell it? Do you have a capital gain? You have to pay taxes on that? No, because you didn't, right? You didn't get any money from that. So that's called an unrealized gain, or it could be a loss, right? If you don't sell it, that's called an unrealized gain or loss. Unrealized gain / loss. Okay? And that's not counted as income as far as taxes go. Okay? Not counted as income. For taxes. Okay? So the value of your portfolio increases. You have not gotten any income from that unless you start selling off some of those investments. Everybody understand that? Now, a realized gain or loss would be when you do sell it and you either make money or lose money. Okay? We talked about, Mercedes, you had a question about, buying and selling stock, how does the company make money, right? Remember when they make money, it's at the initial public offering, right? When they first decide to go public and become incorporated, right? So the IPO stands for initial public offering. Okay? So that's the first issuance of a company stock. Okay? It's the first issue of a company stock. And before they did that, they might well have just been like a partnership, right? Well, the liability and whatnot that comes with it, but then all the control of the company. But then as soon as they go public and sell the stock and bring in the capital from selling the stocks, they're now public, right? And so you lose a little bit of control because now you're not the only one that owns your company, are you? Everyone that bought that stock is now an owner of the company. And then you have to elect a board of directors to make decisions, right? And the stockholders get to vote on things, okay? Because you own part of it. But that's the initial public offering. Now, after that, any sale after this happens in what's called the secondary market. Secondary market. All right, so that's where, if you've seen on TV, the trading floor, all the crazy papers flying and people screaming and jumping off of buildings and whatnot, right? So this is after the IPO. Right, where the shares are traded. Where shares are traded. All right. Anybody have any questions on this part of it here? Okay. So the IPO is where the company gets the revenue from selling that first issuance of their stock, right? And maybe they use that to, expand their business or whatever, build a new plant, kind of thing, go overseas or something like that, right? But then after that, after you bought that initially and then you sell that stock to someone else, they're not getting that money, okay? All right, so let's look at some examples here with gains and losses. Page 501, let's take example 1. Hey, Carly, read example 1, will you please?
Several years ago, Marlene purchased stock for $6,240. say gross capital gain.
Capital gain, and they say gross capital gain, right, so if it was net capital gain, it'd be after you pay taxes on that, right, so just keep it simple there. So, all we gotta do is new minus old, right? Don't ever do old minus new, okay? So what was the new value of the stock? 92.19, wasn't it? Minus the old of the previous value, which I think was 72.41. And it's simple subtracting 1978. Positive, right? It's positive, so that would be a gain. That would be a capital gain. Simple enough, right? And you got to make sure you do the new price minus the old price to get the sign of the result correct. Okay? New minus old. All right? You guys try the check that goes with that. Should be pretty simple. Read that check over. Very carefully, you do new minus old. That's really the only trick here. So they're going to have a gain or a loss? Gain. What's the new value? 2433 minus what they bought it for. So they're having a gain? Yeah. So it's negative what? 1,500 and what is it? 67, right? That's a capital loss. Okay, you got to do new minus old. All right, that's not too complicated. Example 2, yeah, they kind of overcooked their method there with it. Let's take a look at it. 5 years ago, Jessica bought 300 shares. Okay. Company stock for $34.87 per share. Yesterday, she sold them all for $41 a share. Right, so there's a couple ways we can do this one. Right? What was her capital gain or loss? Well, again, we want to do new minus old, but there's a slight little wrinkle here. Right? They didn't give the total value of the purchase or sale, right? They gave the number of shares and the value of each particular share. So what do you think we'll have to do? Right. So she sold it. That's the new, right? So it would be 41 shares, right? Times what? Or $41 times 300 shares. My mistake. That's the new minus what? So 34.87 for the same 300 shares, right? And you can just put that all right in your calculator there. And you should get 1839. Positive, right? And that's a gain. So that's one way to mathematically do that, right? Anybody think of maybe a different way? Work that out? Get the same result? Instead of multiplying by 300 there, each of those values? What if I consider just the gain or loss on one share? Then what could I do? Yeah, right? So you could also do it this way, right? Or, do that. What if we just took one share and did 41 minus what you bought that share for? All right? What do you get there? You get $6.13. 6.13. That's per share, right? And to get the total capital gain now, how many shares were there? So then we could take that 613 times 300, and you should still get 1839. That make sense? Okay. You're going to do the whole thing as a lot altogether, or as an individual share of the multiply by 300. All right, you guys tried the check that goes with that. 125 shares you bought for this day 24. See if you can work out his capital gain or loss. And you can use either method you like there. Give everybody a second. Or we just did 80, 85, 89. It's 125 shares, I think, right? Minus 68.24 times the same 125 gives you 2206.25. Capital gain. And that counts as income for tax purposes if you sold it right. Now, if you hadn't sold it and it went up by that amount, that's again, that's an unrealized gain. Okay? And it doesn't increase your income for tax purposes. Okay, so real quick for the next one. So these are the net gains and losses, right? But you also need to be able to calculate percentage gain and loss so you can compare it to other things, right? Remember how to find percent change, guys? Percent change. Like in two values. You have two values, right? What's the percent change? You know how to get the dollar change, right? What do you do? We're just doing it. Between two different numbers, how do you find the difference between them?
You do new minus old.
Right?
Old,
Yeah, so we do new minus old, the new price of what you sold it for, minus old, and we're comparing it to what it was originally, right? So divided by the old price, and then what? Times 100, right? So again, this is new minus old. We want to get a percent. We're going to divide it by what it originally was, the old, multiply by 100 to get a percent. So let's take a peek then at example 3. And they do, again, they kind of overcook it. Mercedes, read example 3, would you please?
Yes. Randy paid 3,450 shares. Corporation at the he sold it for 6,100. Expresses capital gain as a percent of the original purchase price. Down to the nearest 6%.
Okay, so so they go through and they find the capital, they do the new minus old, right? And then they do this X of some percent times whatever. Why don't we just do new minus old divided by old? And hopefully we'll get the same thing. So it'd be what, 6,100 minus what? 3,450 divided by what? 3,450, right? The original times 100. And be careful again when you put that top in your calculator. You really should use parentheses. You're going to do it all in one smooth motion, right? And we should get a 76.8%. That's pretty darn good. Whew. Gain. That's insane. Might as well get that. Okay, see if you can do it then. Read that check that goes with it. Find the percent gain or loss. Did you do 35 minus 55? New minus old divided by old, right? And then let's make sure you put it in here, right? Parentheses, 35 minus 55, get outside the parentheses, divided by 55, right? Times 100. Oh, it's stupid. I hate these calculators sometimes. You gotta do what? Control enter, right? Control enter. Negative 36%. Okay? Equals negative 36%. Definitely a capital loss. Okay?